Hello everyone. In today's video we are not really doing a repair, but on question of somebody in my audience, I'm going to show you today how to rebush a clock on multiple different ways. I'm not going to show them all, but I will explain them. So 3 weeks ago it was XXX Showbits XXNL who asked this question. He asked how to rebush a clock with with your hands, like manual, not using a machine, with a brooch cutter, which is what I'm going to explain today. For Showbits NL, if I've not spelled your name correctly, please comment about it. I'm sorry in advance if that would be the case. But yeah, on to the bashing. So, as you can see, this clock has had some history to it. Instead of rebushing the holes, they soldered a piece onto this here. Although it's hard to see because there's solder everywhere. Don't know what exactly they tried to solder, but I assume this lip might have broken off and they soldered that. And then here, they punched down the hole instead of rebushing it, which is what we're going to show today. So let's get into what you will need to rebush this clock. So let's start with the bushings. So these are Bajon assorted bushings. They go with a calibrated reamer system. More on that later. But these are bushings that have a known dimension. As you can see, you have the A, which is the hole, the C, total dimension, and then the C also will tell you which reamer you will use, and then B is the height. You do have what is called basically like non-assorted bushings, which is just basically a bag with bushings in various sizes, non-sorted. Some people like to use those. I stick to these because it's way easier. They're a bit more expensive though. And these are brass bushings too. There are bronze bushings, but you can only use bronze bushings on older clocks with high quality axles. The bronze bushings are harder than most of the steel axles of modern clocks, which means that instead of the bushing that's going to wear out, you're going to wear out the axles. The bushers are replaceable, the axles not, so we don't want that. That's why I stick with brass bushings. And even those brass bushings that I use here from Bajon are harder than most main plates of clocks. So, those are the bushings. With this kind of Bajon bushing, there goes calibrated reamers. Those calibrated reamers are called calibrated because they are exactly a third of a hundredth of a millimeter smaller than the bushings. Like the hole you will make is exactly 3/3, like 3/100ths of a millimeter smaller than the bushings, which gives them the ideal fit. Not too snug, not too hard, like not too snug, not too soft, so they will stay in pretty good. However, the person who asked this question asked about to do it with brooch cutters. Now, those are brooch cutters. You will even if you buy calibrated reamers, you will still need brooch cutters to modify the hole inside the bushing, because it's not always going to match. But you can just make the first hole with brooch cutters too. But that means that you need to be careful and do a lot of test fittings, so you won't make the hole too big and the bush will fall through. birch cutters. This one has a plastic handle. You also have birch cutters that have no handle at all, which you will need to place into a holder. I kind of tend to like these more. However, these are cheaper, and if you have a big enough holder, you can still fit them in. So that brings us to the holder. It's one of these. I will put links to all of those things in the description. But yeah, this is the holder that I prefer to use. Then you will also need some punches to punch the bushing into it. These are just Stanley punches, like general purpose. If you can find those, not even Stanley branded from another brand, go for it. I just cleaned the faces of those because they are made to be used on rough things, so it doesn't really matter. But for the use on bushings, I recommend you clean the faces of them, and then they are good to go. In some cases, while bushing, you will need while rebushing, you will need a permanent marker. More about that later. In order to measure which brush you're going to use you need some kind of measuring tool, digital calipers, or one of those JFK fine testers would be fine. If you really want to, you could use normal calipers, but get a high accuracy one. And then you will need something to put your clock onto to support it while you are hammering the bushing in. Just classically, that would have been a riveting stake, but you can also use like a vise if you open it up, and use that to support the clock on. Or these days I tend to often use one of those, which is a block to replace the pins of a bracelet on to knock them out. Why do I use this? Well, because it has a lot of options to support it. Because that's basically, if you have like a lot of axles like this poking out, this can come in handy to be able to support it. But whatever works to rigidly support it, because if you don't, you might end up like bending the plates completely while you are punching the bushing in. And then last but not least, you will need a hammer. This is a 200-gram hammer, which is plenty. And it's just something that I use for convenience. Get yourself like some tweezers, just to get the bushings out of the pockets easily. But yeah, let's get into bushing it. So, you have a clock that needs to be rebushed, but how do you know? Well, what you're looking for is play. When the axle can basically jump around in the hole that's in the main plate. But how do you find that? Well, a good trick that I have for it is that you kind of do move it like this, and then you reverse it. If there is one axle that has a lot of play in it, you will see it shift from side to side. And I know for a fact that this one really needs to be brushed. What is acceptable, that's something you kind of need to make out for yourself. But the more power there is, the more play you can get away with. Which is basically, here you have a lot of power, because this is literally driven. This is driven by a mainspring. And the more you go to the top, the less play you can have without it causing problems. So, I'm quickly going to show you under the microscope what this play looks like, because on the camera, well, you might be able to see it, but just to make sure, I will show it to you in detail under the microscope. So, here we are at the microscope, and we are basically right zoomed in on the hole I was thinking of rebushing, and I was going to show you why. So let's jiggle that around a bit. So there you can see all the play. You can also see the punches they did around it to make the hole a bit smaller, which is a bad idea. I even did a video about it not really long time, but quite a while ago. So yeah, that's basically you move it back and forth and you see it jiggle. And that's when you decide to rebush it. So, back to the table. So, here we are again. So I did remove all the non-necessary parts we don't need. So that's basically 2 plates and the gear. So it is time to measure that pivot of the axle. It's also best to check if the axle is still in a good state. Otherwise, you need to repivot, and then you would need to be doing your rebush. But just sliding with your fingernail like this to feel if there's any like blemishes on that, but it is fine. So let's measure this while trying to stay in view. So we have an axle of exactly 90. Oh, a bit more if you wiggle, but 90. So let's try to find a bushing accordingly. So we'd be looking out for the A measurement, because as you can see here on the drawing, the A measurement is the diameter. So we're going to be looking, but another thing we need to measure is the thickness of the plates. And that's, yeah, about 80. So every bushing we're going to place is going to be too high, because our B diameter is either 140 or 190. So we're just going to get the lowest one and we'll see if that's a problem or not. So we can pick a bush of 90 in the A dimension, but I'm not going to, because when you're punching the bush inside of the plates, it basically shrinks a little. So if you take a bush of 90, guarantee you are going to have to ream it a bit with the birch cutter. So I'm going to take the K14 bushing because it's the lowest I can get, and it's 1 millimeter. So let's get the K14 out. So K14, which is one of those. And then we are going to get the assorted reamer for that, which is the reamer of 270, which is going to be 286, which is a bit smaller than the bushing, so the bushing fits really nice. So we can't fit this straightly into the hole. So there are multiple approaches you can take here. You can enlarge it first with a birch cutter or with the previous calibrated reamer. But I already know that the previous calibrated reamer, like the one smaller than this, will not fit. So a birch cutter with this. Let's see which one will fit. So barely fits. So we're going to start with this one. right now it's still not important, but when you're getting close to the final cut, it is important that you keep your reamer always, or your verge cutter always straight, in opposite, like straight in conjunction to your movement or your main plate, because you want the hole to be like reamed out straight. So we're at the end of this one, so we're going to switch over to the larger one. If you wouldn't be using calibrated reamers, just using a broach cutter, then you would go close to the size of the bushing, and then you would do multiple test fits. To basically be doing this till the bushing fits, and then you would punch it in. We're almost at the end. Now let's see, can we get the calibrated one in yet or not? We could, but barely. So let's step up. So now I'm going to check if I'm perpendicular. So you want to be perpendicular in all directions, so it is a good idea to turn it around a few times while you're doing it. So I'm now getting close. So yes, now I can get this one in, because you don't want the tip of it, the tip of it doesn't cut, so it starts cutting from here off. So once that's in, you're good to go. So now I want to be really straight, because this is the final pass I will do. And we are at the end. Now, we need to clean up the edge, and you're going to be cleaning up the edge 4 times while placing the bushing. Well, 2 times to 4 times, it kind of depends. I use, in order to clean up the hole, I use the largest calibrated reamer I have. However, there are special deburring tools. Some people use a big drill bit. It doesn't really matter how you do it, it does matter that it happens. So let's deburr that edge. Let's deburr this edge. Now you notice that I was always reaming from inside to outside. Why is that? Well, a reamer like this, or a broach cutter like this, it will always leave a hole that's not exactly straight, and that's what we want. Because if we ream it like this, the smaller side will be on the outside, meaning that a bushing is less likely to just pop out. Because if it will pop out, it will pop inwards, but it can't because the gear's there. So that's why we always do it in that direction. So now it is time to punch bushing in. So let's see, like this we can nicely support the movement, and you will lay the bushing on there. This bushing has a little collet that goes on the outside. That's where the oil will sit. So now let's get our tweezers in to nicely manipulate everything. Now we have it nicely lined. So let's get our punch and give it a tap with the hammer. We want it to be flush. Almost flush. Not a whack, and it should be fine. Yeah, it is nicely in. So now let's do a test fit. So you should be able to have it wobble in all directions equally, and as you can see, I can do it in this direction, but not this far in that direction, which means that I'm going to have to ream it a bit out with a brush cutter. Not much, preferably one that fits. Yes, this one fits. Yeah, now it wobbles nicely in all directions, so it is fine. So now we're going to see if it spins okay. Always test after bushing, always test your gears one by one. But yeah, that is how you place a bushing with a calibrated reamer. I will quickly show how to do it with a birch cutter, like how I go about it. I'm going to get it set up so we don't have to repeat ourselves in the video, and then yeah, see you there. So I reamed it out till I was almost there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to ream a bit and then do a test fit. Why am I doing this like this? Well, if you ream it out too big, there's no way of going back. You can do a bushing in a bushing, but that's not a way I'm willing to go. So just doing it careful, reaming it a bit out at a time, and then doing a test fit. So I reamed it out a bit. Now let's see. I think we're pretty close already. Oh, there goes the bushing. just a bit more. Another tiny bit. It sits on there pretty nicely. So let's debar that and let's see if it wants to go in. Going to switch to the smaller punch. There's not much space to work with. Oh, and the bushing came out. Let's try it again. It is possible that I need to enlarge on the hole a tiny bit more. Although it sits rather nicely in there. Problem I'm having right now is that gear is a bit in the way. That's better. Why does the keep want to come out? No, one tap more. Now it stays in. Almost there. Yes, and now it is flush. And that's what we want. So normally we would do a test fit, like I showed with this one. Yeah, already showed that. So the only thing I'm going to talk about is that it's important. I was talking about the height of bushings. That is important that your pivot of the axle sticks through the bushing completely. If that's not the case and it starts to wear out, you're basically burying the pivot in the side of the bushing, which will cause premature failure. So that's not what you want. That's why it's important. It sticks out. It needs to be in the oil part. If that's not the case, there are special cutters for that, or you could use a drill bit of suitable size, but it's important that it is free and can't bury itself. So that was it. That were the ways of how to bush a clock. Like you can see, the second way I showed you, which is the birch cutters, is a bit harder. Definitely possible. There are tricks to it. Like all the watchmakers, they used to put marks on the birch cutters, so they knew to which the length of the birch cutter they need to go to be good for certain bushing. But yeah, with a little bit of practice, it's definitely doable. It's also a cheaper way. So yeah, that was it for this video. I hope you liked it, and see you in the next one. Bye bye.